Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Naked with Dr. Money. If you're checking your calendar, your schedule, you're right. We're a little bit late today, but I hope that you hung out there and you knew we were coming. Of course, I'm traveling, so I had a few technical difficulties, so it was a little bit delayed, but we're going to get right to our show today. For those of you who are joining me for the first time, I'm Dr. Stephanie Ardrey, the CEO of ZenoVerse Wellness Group, Incorporated. And Naked with Dr. Money is my personal vlog where I share a little bit of the behind the scenes of how I maintain my mind, body, and soul as we help others heal and nurture their mind, body, and souls through our various wellness resorts around the world. uh, Naked with Dr. Money came to me as a way because people always say, well, Steph, you do all these things. We can't emulate these things. We don't know how you do it. And so I thought, well, if I pull back the curtain a little bit, then you'll see, my journey, at least weekly. And the conversation and thoughts and focused that we put in place and that I personally put in place to focus on intentions so that I can manifest and create the life that I want to live every day rather than living through the nightmare that I've experienced, perhaps at times in the past. So, anyway, those of you again that know, our conversation is around mindset. And so typically, I explore with my guests when they first recognized that they had a mindset. If it is, they believe mindset is the product of their nature, how they're nurtured, or a little bit of both. So, a little bit of both. And then how they believe their mindset has fostered their motivations and, more importantly, the manifestations along their journey. So today's guest is a good friend of mine. And so, when I get to have a conversation with a friend, sometimes we end up gushing a little extra about that. But Lisa Bishop and I go back, I'm going to say probably from, at least for me, I'm going to say around 15 years of age. And it's so funny because along this journey, when you meet someone, you never know if it's going to be a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And so, again, all of those things can vary. You never know along that journey. But I'm so happy that we've been able to sustain our friendship over this journey and, in fact, our sisterhood, because really, when you're going through this journey called life, you need some folks that are there, wherever you need them along the way. Lisa Bishop she's an expert in leadership development. She holds a master's of business administration. She focuses on leadership development. She's very active in organizational development and leadership and is a professional coach for many high performing executives. So she brings a lot of great talent and skills to our conversation. So without any further ado, I'm going to invite you to introduce you to my friend and professional colleague, Miss Lisa Bishop.
Good afternoon, Dr. Stephanie. So great to be here on your
Hey,
show.
Lisa, how
Hi,
you doing?
good
I,
to
you
see
know, I
you.
mentioned I was having a little difficulties earlier, so we're praying that we can get through our conversation. It's a little choppy, but bear with me. You look
That's all
beautiful
right.
as
You
usual.
do
So happy to see you.
too. Just glowing in the sunshine, looks like, huh?
So, Missy, I don't know if you heard me. So, we're talking about mindset. And, in that thought, I mean, wow, I'm here in the Bay Area for my 40-year high school reunion. So,
Good for
I know,
you. That's awesome.
I know I'm really telling, I'm letting all the bags, the goods out the bag.
Definitely, without a doubt. This is great. It's an honor to be here with you and great to see you and great to see your growth and the trajectory of all things Dr. Stephanie and Dr. Money. This is great. Nice platform, and I'm honored to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I want to jump right in just because we know our time is valuable and a little bit tight today. Mindset. When do you first think that you became aware that you had a particular mindset?
Probably when I realized I was different than a lot of different people in my thought process, and I tend to go high in my thoughts. I usually give people the benefit of the doubt as opposed to automatically going for the jugular, which most people do. They have a tendency to go down a path of what's wrong instead of what are the possibilities. And I have a tendency to be more optimistic than most. So I probably recognized it early on, probably in my college days, when friends wouldn't want to go home for spring break or the breaks that we had in between. And I simply meant just because it was across the bridge, because I was going to school in San Francisco and I lived in the East Bay. And no, they really meant they really didn't want to go home. And so they were always welcome to come to my home. So mindset is a different type of thing. It doesn't matter where you come from or where you stand, you can always shift into a better stance if you're open and give yourself grace. So it happened for me in college.
And do you think that your mindset is the result of your nature, how you were nurtured, or a little bit of both?
Definitely a combination. I'm an Army brat, so I've lived all over the United States. And so we moved every couple of years. And if you wanted to have friends other than your siblings, you needed to know how to say hello. Hi, my name is Lisa. Nice to meet you. You want to play with me, you want to go on the slide or what have you. And so it sort of set the stage and the tone. And then I've also always kind of been the big sister to most people in my group, and people will come because I listen. I listen without judgment, and I allow a person to be able to share whatever is happening with them in their world. And then we talk about what it is that they want to do rather than me infiltrating what my thoughts are and judging them on where they happen to be. So that has a lot to do with your mindset for sure.
Absolutely. And I think these days you work in the leadership development space. So
Mm-hmm.
I know we can expand this conversation even larger to really take into consideration what do you see when you deal with many of the high powered leaders? Are you finding that many of them recognize one when their mindset began to take shape? And more importantly, two, what the factors are that help them to create or cultivate a particular mindset.
Well, it's interesting. Usually, with leaders, they usually have a very limited time in terms of making decisions, in terms of going to the next stage. They're always thinking about what's happening in terms of their goals that they have to set. But they also hit level sets where they often are emotionally hijacked and they don't know what to do. And it's not part of the book, it's not in a scheme, it's not something that they can follow, in a manual somewhere. And you really have to think on your own and on your feet. Think about the pandemic and how that sort of took us all off our feet and took us backwards. We had to level set, we had to reset, we had to say, hey, I don't know how to do this, but we're going to figure it out together. And here's the game plan. And what do you think? And inviting people into the process, but recognizing that even as smart as you are, as much information that you have, there's still more to know, and helping to humanize people so that they can see that there's more besides just the bottom line. So if you invite your people into the process, it helps to ground you in a way that lets your mind think differently outside of the box because you're giving yourself permission. Even me right now today, I'm actually sitting out in nature having this conversation with you, which is wonderful. So my feet are actually rumbling through the grass as we're speaking, and I feel like a little girl and I want to jump rope. That's a mindset, level set. It helps to recalibrate and helps you to rethink where you are, where you're going, and what you need to do rather than the crisis of what it is that you have to do right now. So we have to think about being centered in ways that help us and little small snippets. Give yourself permission of those things, whatever they happen to be.
It's so true because, in these conversations around mindset, what I
Mm-hmm.
found is that a couple things have definitely presented themselves, such as one thing I realized that what we focus on is what we create.
Okay.
100%.
I
So
agree.
whatever it is you tell yourself,
Yeah.
if you tell yourself enough that thing, it becomes your truth. Doesn't mean that it's the truth in the world, but it
Mm-hmm.
does become your personal truth.
Mm-hmm.
What
Mm-hmm.
happens
Mm-hmm.
is our brains, as well as the universe, doesn't distinguish between if it's good or bad.
True.
So it helps you to start producing what you believe is evidence
Yeah.
to support your thoughts, no matter how far off base those thoughts are. And so, because of that, it's began to help me understand a couple of two phenomenons. One, the surge of mental illness
Mm-hmm.
and how many people have not done the mind development work. So their minds are just, running rampant. But more importantly, the epidemic, the drug epidemic, we have a lot of drug babies who are
True.
now young adults.
Yeah.
And we talk about the inability to foster creative thought, critical
Mm-hmm.
thinking, to process and reason and make rational decisions, and then inform those thoughts. I mean, I'm seeing it just in abundance, sadly,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we've been conspiring and working with, other doctors, the medical community, researchers, as well as our team to try to help understand this a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
It seems that now, thankfully, people are having the conversation, but kind of to that context, what do you see or what do you think as it relates to how well someone has developed their mindset, in terms of how their mindset influences their behavior and interaction, especially in leadership or in organizational roles and developments? Because again, we're seeing organizations with multi generations
True.
of workers attempting
True.
to coexist. And
Exactly. And it's very different because each generation has a mindset, has a thought process, has strengths, also has stressors and things that trigger them. There's protocols from each one of the generations that make a difference. I'm glad that you asked the question. In terms of, and it's sort of multifaceted, so work with me as I try to respond to you that makes sense for your audience. When you're dealing with leadership, are you in a state of crisis, or the sky is falling, or the building's on fire? Are you in a state of newness or innovation where you're open and your mind is into the creativity of all things are possible? Are you in a mature stage where there's already a culture that's set and this is the way that we do things? Depends on where you are in terms of your leadership. If you're in a stage of growth, you'll have one particular mindset. If you're in a stage of maturity or things are going status quo and work a certain way, you're in a different type of mindset. If you're in a stage of decline or where you feel like there needs to be an ultimate change, those are different mindsets too. And they're approached differently. I figure out what's going on. I want to know what's happening within your organization. What's your SWOT? What is your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are the opportunities and what are the threats? We kind of go over that, figure out what's happening, what's going on within the org, what's going on within the leadership team, and where do they ultimately want to go. We look at a big picture and then break it down into bite-sized, digestible pieces to figure out a game plan on a quarterly basis. So, what are they going to do for the end of the year, which would be Q4, and then beginning with 2024 and beyond, and breaking those down into chunks. And if you can just think of three things that are going to help move the pendulum in your organization, it makes all the difference in the world. You need a trusted ally, a trusted resource, and you also need a neutral third party who can realistically look at the forest, because when you're in the trees, you can't see it. If you're in the boat, you don't need somebody telling you to row the boat. You need a motor that's going to help take you to the other side because you've run out of strength. So, are you in crisis? Are you in a challenge? Are you in a space where you're feeling burnt out and everything is status quo? It makes all the difference in the world. So, looking at the big picture, reassessing it, finding out what's happening, coming up with a game plan, putting it into digestible, bite sized pieces and goals that can move your company forward is kind of the sweet spot. Did I answer your question?
It's so interesting because I was thinking about that. Um, I said this to someone and they kind of laughed at me, and that
Yeah.
was I grew up with an understanding that faith and fear did not coexist. So I could recognize along the journey if at any point I was in fear and that fear
Mm-hmm.
disconnected from the source of
Mm-hmm.
my faith. But I'll tell
Mm-hmm.
you, I didn't realize that the same principle applied to love and fear and being in the
Mm.
vibrational energy of love and what that felt like. So I've
Mm-hmm.
been studying A Course in Miracle. I'm on my second year through the course directly.
Okay.
And I remembered that when Marianne Williamson finished the course, she wrote the book A Return to Love. I read her book years ago, and of course, she's been
Okay.
cited for several comments. And I can see that how the teachings of the course have helped me to move into the vibration of love. But I can also recognize at times when it is that I am not in that vibration and how that impacts whatever it is I'm experiencing. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's also too, again, about the tools that you develop so that you can have other tools to help you process what's
Sure.
going on.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so kind of post pandemic, I've heard a lot of increased anxiety and how that is impacting mental wellness in organizations and with people. And what I
Mm-hmm.
see personally
Mm-hmm.
is it's definitely the perspective of, is the person operating from fear or are they operating from a state of love? Because that's the lens that then informs which particular experience they're having. And more
Mm-hmm.
importantly, because of that, that informs how they then show up. Because most people don't realize it. When you show up, you're projecting yourself on the next person. You haven't even seen that person because you're living Groundhog Day in your own mind based on the memories that you're telling
Mm-hmm.
yourself. So, you know,
Yeah, very
where are,
true.
people that you're encountering along this kind of spectrum, if you will, of a little bit of mental wellness, but how that mental wellness is baked into their mindsets.
That's a pretty loaded question and a great statement and a great observation because that's all about awareness. That's what this whole emotional intelligence is about. It's like, do I know who I am? Do I have the tools to take care of myself when I'm emotionally hijacked and I don't know what's going on or what to do, or something's blindsided me completely off my scope of my perfect to do list, if you will? And it's interesting because paying attention to what's happening with you makes a difference. If you give yourself permission to be okay, you're going to be okay. It isn't your job to make somebody else feel comfortable when they don't feel comfortable and project whatever is happening with them. But that's what's happening in the marketplace across the board. You kind of can't get around it. When you've rested properly, when you've had your proper nutrition and you're taking care of yourself, that stuff just rolls off of you like a water to a duck's back. But when you haven't had rest, when you haven't had your proper nutrition, when you haven't given yourself balance, all things are off and they're totally different. And your level of awareness is minimized significantly because you can only see what's in front of you. Your ability to see around you and what's happening is minimized significantly because your tank needs to be filled up. Figure out what you need to do to fill up your tank, and it'll make all the difference in the world, and you will show up differently. You can't give what you don't have. If you're operating on fumes, you're going to project on fumes. But you are not aware, you don't know. And if nobody pulls your chain and says, "Hey, Steph, are you okay? I just noticed something's a little different." If nobody tells you, you are in robot mode and you're just still moving forward. We all need help, we all need support, and we all need to take care of ourselves, regardless if you are a leader or not. That's just in general. It's good for your health, good for the sanity, good for the world.
It's such a difference because, we've always had, I've heard the statement over and over again about hurt people hurting people. But
Yeah.
as I've continued on this healing journey, what I've noticed is that healed people hear differently. And
Yes.
it's amazing because now
Yes.
when I have conversations with people who are hurting, they don't trigger me the same way that they could have been a trigger before I had really, taken deeper
Mm-hmm.
dives into my own
Mm-hmm.
healing journey.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because you hear them projecting their pain, and that they're projecting themselves, as you're listening.
Absolutely.
And it's like, wow, it's like my cousin and I, he always had this saying, don't confuse me with the facts when my mind is already made up. And so, we would laugh about that. But I'm like, no, that's scary. There's people that really, they've made up their alternative facts. And unfortunately, the past administration really made that a thing. And there's this, population of people
Mm-hmm.
who really have bought into this. And then you also have them compromised, right? In ways that they don't realize. They're chemically compromised because of the horrible food that they eat, the drugs, prescriptions, and all. Like, they're in toxic bodies, and they don't
Mm-hmm.
realize that those toxins are feeding their brain. And then the brains are already compromised because so many of them,
Right.
again, are drug
Right.
babies. And
Right.
you add to it, and then they've added on this emotional trauma, much of it made up, right? But still added on. And what does anyone do when they're looking for ways? They try to find someone that they can associate it with, because otherwise they can't be a good victim, right? So
That's
you
right.
have a society of victims running around making up stuff and projecting it on the people. It's like, wow, how are we going to stop that trade? And we have to,
We really
which again, as I know
do. We really do.
that you do.
That's interesting. The other day on LinkedIn, I saw this quote from Sarah Blakely and I loved it. And it says, your light may irritate a lot of unhealed people. Shine anyway. Oh my goodness. I think that should be my mantra forever because Sunshine is my middle name. And I believe it totally. And it's true. Have you ever noticed when you're really in a happy space and you're around people who are not so happy? They're wondering, why are you smiling? What are you so
Oh my,
happy about? It just can't
they
be
want to
that
tear
great.
you down. They want to tear you down
Yes,
so fast. Yeah.
yes, yes, yes,
Yes, and you
yes.
have to get away from them because their energy is toxic, and that energy will throw you off. Like, I realized I was having a conversation with Doc, and I kind of flashed a little bit, and then it was like, whoa, 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 what's going on? And I'm like, wait a second, what
Right.
energy that I literally allow into this space? Like, I had to step back and clear the
Yeah,
energy, because it's
yeah,
like, I
yeah.
don't mean to talk to you in this, it has nothing to do, this has nothing to do with you. But thankfully, again, you're dealing with somebody who's healed, who's studied, who's worked in the space. So it's like, it's like, no, I have
Mm-hmm.
enough equity in with you, emotional equity, to know that if something is, off base, if you're off balance, okay, is she tired? Is she hungry?
That's right. That's called a halt. Is she hungry? Is she angry? Is she lonely? Is she tired?
Right, right.
And
What's the
I met a
trigger?
guru the
Yeah.
other day who had a couple of others, and I can't remember what she added to them. But halt is a real thing, and it does make a difference. But the key here, Dr. Stephanie, is that you are aware. So you're able to catch yourself in real time and do something about it and pivot and make that a difference. What happens with the folks who are on fumes? They can't even spell halt, let alone figure out where they are because their tank needs to get fueled up again. Superman goes into the phone booth to get reprieve. Even the best of us need to take a break and recharge and re incentivize our senses, our body, our psyche, the whole nine yards. So, part of emotional intelligence is called self management. And self management means these are the tips and the tools and the things that I do to make myself okay when I'm off base. I'm aware. I'm off base, but I can still function. But what do I do? Sometimes I'll inhale lavender oils or essential oils. I drink water with peppermint essential oils and basil and lemon. It makes me feel good. I listen to Zen music in the background when I'm on a Zoom call. All these things to keep me grounded and centered. Think about it and ask your folks what is it that they do to make themselves okay in the midst of either chaos, being thrown off base, you're going down the line, everything is going like you thought it was, and all of a sudden something happens that you didn't anticipate. You still have to produce, you still have to perform, you still have to show up. But how you show up and what you do for yourself to be okay in the process makes all the difference. Are you there? I think I might have lost her. Okay. I think
Sorry, I got bumped out, but I guess that's a sign I'm supposed to be on another show anyway. So, Lise, why don't you tell people how they can get in contact with you? Because I know that you're a fascinating leadership coach, and we're going to be doing crucial conversations because it feels like the world needs to get trained
don't
on.
they? Absolutely, without a doubt. Well, thank you again. It's a privilege. My name is Lisa Bishop. I'm a leadership development consultant and executive coach, and my company is the Bishop Concept. You can find me on LinkedIn or you can find me at www.thebishopconcept.com. Thank you, Dr. Stephanie. It was great being on your show today.
Yes, and for those of you tuned in today, it seemed like on my side I had a little bit of kind of a choppy experience. So when I go to play back, if it looks like that's how you experienced our segment, I'm inviting Lise back and we're going to have a do-over where I have stronger technology connection so that you could hear everything she said because she dropped nuggets. So I hope you got it. I saw a couple thumbs up, so I'm going to presume that you're getting it good, even though I'm getting it a little bit choppy. But Lise, as usual, thank you, my friend, my sister, for joining me.
Nothing
And
but love.
two is coming up. All
My
right.
pleasure. Thank
Real
you.
soon.
Take care.
So again, guys, again, we were a little bit late starting, but remember, if it's Wednesday and it's noon Pacific Daylight Time, it's time for Naked with Dr. Money. I hope you'll join me again next week. I don't remember now who the guest is for next week, but look out and tune in, and I hope to see you there. Our conversation is always about mindset, motivations, and manifestations, and encouraging you to love on you. So until next week, here's my big hug to you, and I'll see you soon. Mwah. Smooches. Be well.